No tanks rolling, no missiles launching, no formal declaration of war. And yet the most dangerous phase of global conflict has already begun. While the world watches headlines about Ukraine, Gaza, and elections in Washington, a quieter, far more calculated campaign is unfolding in Beijing. Xi Jinping is not preparing for war the way past empires did. He is preparing for a war that begins before the first shot is fired, a war designed to be won before the enemy even realizes it has started. This is not weakness. This is strategy at its most evolved form. Xi understands something most Western leaders still don't. Point T. Modern wars are not decided on battlefields first. They're decided in factories, supply chains, data centers, shipping lanes, currencies, and chips. By the time bombs fall, the outcome is often already locked in. China's objective is simple but ruthless: reshape the global order without triggering a coalition strong enough to stop it. That means avoiding dramatic military actions while systematically weakening opponents economically, technologically, psychologically, and diplomatically. What looks like patience is actually positioning. What looks like restraint is preparation. This is why Taiwan hasn't been invaded yet, why China talks peace while militarizing the South China Sea, and why cyber intrusions and trade dependencies matter more than aircraft carriers. Xi is not asking if war will come. He is engineering a world where, when conflict becomes unavoidable, China starts from a position where victory is already statistically likely. This is the opening phase of a war designed to be invisible, deniable, and devastating. Xi Jinping learned a critical lesson from watching Russia after 2022. Tanks don't collapse economies, sanctions do. China's response wasn't to abandon globalization, but to weaponize interdependence. The world depends on China for manufacturing rare earths, pharmaceuticals, electronics, solar panels, batteries, and increasingly critical components inside everything from cars to missiles. This dependency is not accidental. It was cultivated over decades and is now being refined into leverage. Xi's strategy is not to cut the world off suddenly, which would provoke immediate backlash, but to create a system where any serious confrontation with China triggers economic pain everywhere else first. Western companies, governments, and consumers become hostages to stability. Every escalation risks inflation, shortages, and political unrest at home. This is why Beijing tolerates short-term economic pain while doubling down on self-sufficiency. It's also why China aggressively diversifies trade away from the U.S. and Europe toward Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Economic warfare under Xi is slow, legal, and devastatingly effective. No sanctions announcements, no blockades. Just quiet leverage that turns global prosperity into a shield. When dependence becomes mutual but asymmetrical, the side that can absorb pain longer controls escalation. Xi is betting China can. Forget aircraft carriers. The real battlefield of the 21st century is silicon. Xi Jinping understands that whoever controls advanced semiconductors controls modern power, military, economic, and technological. This is why the U.S. export controls on advanced chips triggered a national mobilization in China. Billions are being poured into domestic semiconductor development, not because China expects to catch up overnight, but because it needs just enough capability to survive a prolonged conflict. At the same time, China uses its dominance in older node chips, rare earth processing, and manufacturing scale to apply pressure elsewhere. The chip war is asymmetric. The West leads in design and cutting-edge fabrication. China leads in scale, materials, and assembly. Xi's strategy is not to win the chip war outright, but to ensure no one can fully win against China either. A conflict over Taiwan wouldn't just be a military crisis. It would freeze the world or its most advanced chip supply overnight. Xi doesn't need to pull that trigger yet. The threat alone reshapes corporate decisions, defense planning, and diplomacy. Every company relocating factories, every government subsidizing domestic fabs, is reacting to a war that hasn't officially begun. That's the point. The most active front of Xi Jinping's war preparation isn't visible at all. It's digital. Cyber operations, data collection, influence campaigns, and infrastructure mapping are happening constantly, below the threshold of war. This is not chaos. It's reconnaissance. Modern conflict requires knowing how power grids fail, how financial systems react under stress, how public opinion fractures, and how fast misinformation spreads. Cyber warfare allows China to map vulnerabilities without firing a shot. Information warfare shapes narratives long before crises erupt. The goal is confusion, hesitation, and division. A society arguing with itself is slower to respond externally. Xi doesn't need to convince the world China is right. He only needs to make sure no unified response against China is politically sustainable. Doubt is the weapon. Delay is the objective. By the time clarity emerges, the window to act has often closed. Taiwan is the centerpiece of Xi Jinping's long game, but also its greatest risk. A direct invasion could unify the world against China, so Xi applies pressure without crossing the line. Military drills normalize encirclement, airspace violations test response times, economic pressure targets Taiwanese industries. Diplomatic isolation reduces international support. The message is constant, resistance is costly, accommodation is stable. Over time, the goal is psychological exhaustion, not just in Taiwan but in Washington, Tokyo, and European capitals. If defending Taiwan becomes economically painful and politically divisive, the strategic calculus shifts. Xi isn't rushing because time currently favors China. Demographics, industrial scale, and regional influence are trends he believes he can manage if war is delayed long enough. Xi Jinping's strategy is not about avoiding war forever. It's about choosing the moment when war becomes unnecessary or unavoidable on China's terms. This is the most dangerous phase of global politics because it feels deceptively calm. Markets still trade, flights still fly, diplomats still smile. But beneath the surface, systems are being hardened, alliances tested, dependencies shifted, and red lines quietly redrawn. History shows that wars often begin not with explosions, but with miscalculations. The greatest risk today isn't that Xi wants war tomorrow. It's that the world fails to recognize that the pre-war phase is already here. When the first shot is finally fired, if it ever is, it may only confirm a result already decided years earlier in silence.